This case takes place in the United States of America in March of 2011. Vera was born on the 11th of July 1986 in the small city of Findlay, Ohio, to her parents Willard Reigle and Verna Garner. She had a sister named Ashley who described Vera as her best friend. Vera was known for her friendly and sociable nature, enjoying spending time with people, dressing up and wearing jewelry, and singing along to country music. From a young age, Vera was always willing to help others without complaint. Despite her exceptionally sweet and compassionate nature, Vera encountered significant mental challenges. She faced cognitive, developmental issues, resulting in a mental age far below her actual age, estimated to be between 8 and 12 years old once she reached adulthood. Alongside a very low IQ, Vera was diagnosed with ADHD, though those close to her believe she grappled with an additional undisclosed issues. These conditions rendered her particularly vulnerable to exploitation, as predators often possess the uncanny ability to identify and target individuals with vulnerabilities. At 18, just before her 19th birthday, Vera started a romantic relationship with Zachary Brooks, a member of the Brooks family. Zachary, who was only 13 at the time, was the 7th child of Sherry Brooks. Little did Vera know she was embarking on a dangerous path into a family plagued by despair and extreme depravity. This horrific and truly disgusting case highlights how individuals trapped in the cycles of their traumatic pasts can become the sinister antagonists in the stories of others. From a young age, Vera's struggles extended beyond her mental health challenges, as she also faced difficulties at home. Whilst her mother loved her very much, Vera endured significant suffering in her domestic environment. Vera's father, Willard, had on numerous occasions subjected her to intimate and physical assaults during her childhood. Willard began with touching Vera and Ashley inappropriately until the age of around 11, before escalating to full-blown SA. Willard did not get away with his repulsive abuse of power over his daughters, and he found himself sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, a positive step towards justice. However, the lasting impact of such experiences often leads to serious mental trauma and feelings of resentment and abandonment. Even if the other parent was unaware of what was going on, the perceived lack of protection can fuel deep-seated anger and psychological issues, sometimes resulting in misplaced frustration directed towards those closest to them. In Vera's case, this doesn't necessarily indicate unhappiness with her mother, but rather a reluctance to express emotions, and as a result, their relationship became very closed off. Tragically, Vera's vulnerability was exploited further when her mother entered a new relationship. Vera and Ashley's new stepfather would go on to inflict further despicable harm in the same way that their biological father did. Despite Verna's historically appalling taste in men, she eventually did meet a decent man named Lynn Messersmith. They married, and Lynn officially adopted Vera and Ashley, giving them a good father figure and a sense of security for the first time in their lives. Despite her traumatic past and her mental disadvantages, by 2005, Vera had attained her Findlay High School diploma. Her positive and innocent outlook on life was her superpower, but her difficulties left Vera no better prepared to sense the ill intentions of people around her and perceive danger as it approached. Unfortunately, at the age of 18, Vera Jo Reigle entered the sights of Sherry Brooks. For us to further divulge in this horrific case, we must pause here for a moment and switch lanes to better understand the making of a person who would soon become one of the worst manipulators and truly sinister human beings to ever walk this earth. Sherry Lynn Brooks was born on the 3rd of November 1962 in Ohio, to her parents Charlotte Bixler and Charles Emmons. Her father was known by the nickname Big Chuck. However, he was a not-so-big man and had a fondness of inflicting harm on women and youngsters. Sherry was one of 4 siblings who, until she turned 3, witnessed Big Chuck's physical and intimate abuse towards their mother, Charlotte. Tragically, Sherry herself became a target for her father's chronic attacks. Eventually, Sherry and her siblings were taken into protective custody by the state. However, during the 1960s and even today, such intervention doesn't always ensure a new safe and nurturing environment. Instead, they were placed into an orphanage and endured years of instability, moving between various orphanages, group homes, and foster families. The result was that Sherry was left with immense abandonment issues and a mental scarring from the ones who were supposed to love her. At 16 years of age, Sherry seized the opportunity to leave her foster family she had been staying with and return to her mother's care. However, upon her return, an unsettling turn of events unfolded. Sherry fabricated a story about giving birth while in custody of child authorities. As Charlotte, her mother, delved into the matter in search of her supposed grandchild, it became apparent that the child Sherry claimed to have given birth to was someone else's. This unsettling revelation foreshadowed darker events and hinted at Sherry's later actions. At the time Sherry moved back into her mother was divorcing her father, Big Chuck. However, for a period, Big Chuck still lived under the same roof, and it wasn't long before Big Chuck reconvened his habit of physically asserting himself over her. In a horrendous twist of fate, Sherry's life experiences had led her to believe that all of her previous struggles were the result of the state. She blamed the state for taking her away from her family, and instead of blaming her father for the abuse, she idolized him and turned her hatred towards institutions such as the protective services. Big Chuck and Sherry's inappropriate relationship continued, and her father sadistically gave her the nickname Sugar Babe, a label that stuck as it coincided with Sherry's later dealings of illegal substances. The other implication behind this nickname is deeply disturbing and sickening. In summary, Big Chuck's manipulative tendencies were evident, and Sherry soon learned from him. Not long after she rejoined her family, Sherry, aka Sugar Babe, grew closer to one of her cousins named Daniel Bixler. Unfortunately, the concept of familial boundaries seemed to elude Sherry, as she did not recognize the lines that most people would never cross. Regrettably, it appeared that their extended family didn't share this understanding either, as Daniel reciprocated Sherry's feelings. Now, of course, it is not illegal to marry a first cousin in many parts of the world. However, it is ill-advised, as generationally it can cause serious harm to offspring. In this case, Sherry even joked about their situation, claiming that the town was calling them kissing cousins. On the 9th of August 1981, Sherry and Daniel gave birth to their firstborn son and named him Scotty. Although it wasn't long before Scotty was taken out of her custody due to concerns that Sherry was inappropriately touching him, just how she was touched by her father, Big Chuck. Scotty was placed into the care of Sherry's mother, Charlotte. Despite this, Sherry was never charged with committing a crime. On reflection, it is a very strange decision from the social services, because, as you may remember, Charlotte had all 4 of her children taken away from her, so what made her a good candidate to care for Scotty? Nevertheless, Sherry decided to leave her cousin Daniel and move to the city of Findlay, where she would meet a man and swiftly marry him in 1982 named Mike Maloney. Little over a year later, on the 19th of August 1983, Sherry gave birth to her second child, whom they named Joshua. Thankfully, given Sherry's history, soon after Joshua's birth, the protective services got involved. During the initial visit by their caseworker, concerns arose regarding the living conditions. The trailer was deemed hazardous due to its lack of childproofing and cleanliness. Moreover, Sherry was eligible to receive benefits, which would provide essential items such as milk, cheese, vegetables, and formula for Joshua. However, she failed to attend the benefits appointment and was subsequently dropped from the program. Without this assistance, Sherry struggled to afford formula for Joshua. Unable to afford formula, she resorted to giving Joshua cow's milk, despite their pediatrician's warnings against it. This decision led to severe stomach issues for Joshua, resulting in constant crying. Mike's patience reached its limit when, in the presence of a family member at their trailer, he resorted to physical violence against Joshua. Shockingly, Mike slapped Joshua across the face and then threw him onto a couch. All the while, Sherry remained silent. This incident was reported to a protective services caseworker by the concerned family member, and Joshua was taken into protective custody. Despite all of this, Sherry decided to have another child in hopes that she would be able to keep the next. Sherry gave birth to Michael Jr., who protective services took away due to neglect not long after. In 1986, Sherry and Mike had yet another. They gave birth to Maria, a baby girl. In stark contrast, Maria was always kept clean, healthy, and dressed in cute outfits by Sherry. Sherry's affection for Maria was evident, to the point where some even considered it excessive and obsessive. Sherry was reluctant to let anyone, including Mike, hold Maria, and her insistence on sleeping beside her every night raised some red flags among family members. Their concerns proved to be valid when, on the day before Easter in 1986, Sherry, Mike, and for reasons which are still unknown, Big Chuck took Maria to the hospital. This decision followed a troubling discovery by Sherry after changing Maria's diaper. Under doctors' examinations, blood was found in her diaper. This raises the question as to what caused the injury and why in that location, but one thing is for certain. Sherry would never have taken her eyes off Maria, so she would likely be complicit in any wrongdoing. When Maria was not taken back to the hospital for her follow-up appointment, doctors called the police, and Maria was finally taken into protective services. After losing her fourth child, Sherry became obsessed with caring for other people's children like her neighbours. One neighbour, Vera Garner, gave birth to Vera Jo Reigle. It is unclear as to why Vera allowed someone with such a terrible track record with neglect take care of Vera. However, she did, but boundaries within their relationship became blurred, with Sherry taking herself round to Vera's house uninvited to sit with Vera. Vera eventually told Sherry to take a step back, and she could see that Sherry was becoming obsessed, a sentiment which Sherry would return to when Vera got older. Sherry went on to have another girl, whom she named Little Sherry. Again, she was taken away from her very quickly after birth, and by this point, Sherry and Mike's relationship had deteriorated beyond repair, leading to a swift divorce. That said, Sherry wasted no time in moving on, and soon found herself in the company of another man named Kevin. Unlike Mike, Kevin was not reported to be abusive. Rather, he was a passive husband and soon-to-be father. In 1991, Kevin Lee Jr., also known as Punky, entered the world. Under the influence of Kevin Sr., Sherry managed to keep him and raise Punky. However, Punky grew into a highly volatile and antisocial juvenile, with a propensity for violence, eventually associating himself with the gang known as the Crips, or at least appearing to be. On the 18th of June 1992, Sherry and Kevin welcomed Zachary Curtis Brooks into their lives. Zachary experienced mental delays and learning disabilities, later also diagnosed with anti-personality disorder, resembling a mini version of Punky with additional challenges. In quick succession, in July of 1993, Sherry gave birth to another son named Garth. Unlike his older brothers, Garth exhibited a calmer demeanour similar to his father Kevin, although he still engaged in petty crime. And now, to complete the Brooks family tree, in 1997, Sherry gave birth to another son, whom she named Chuck Alfred Brooks, after her beloved, yet predatory and incestuous father. This is particularly disturbing, as Big Chuck still came round to Sherry's home, dismissing her husband Kevin, and having his way with his daughter, Sugar Babe. Chuck grew up to be just like Punky and Zach, a terror to society. After her two boys from the first batch, Scott and Mike Jr., came of age, Sherry persuaded them to come back and live with her and their now younger brothers. Sherry decided to have no more children herself, but she was determined to see her boys start families of their own, even at the young age of 13, as she wanted to have grandchildren to obsess over. Sherry became convinced that her 13-year-old son Zachary would be the perfect match for Vera Jo Reigle, the daughter of her old neighbour Werner. As I previously mentioned, Sherry had been fixated on Vera for some time. At this point, Vera Jo Reigle was 18 and just about to turn 19, so she hatched a plan for her to join with her family. And now, the two stories converge. Vera had not been having much luck in the past with the opposite sex, and she was soon taken in by Zachary's affections. Despite a deeply troublesome age gap and both being mentally challenged, Sherry's plan was a success, and they both fell in love. The Brooks family held Vera in high regard, and were sycophantical. At this point, Vera had been living with her aunt, and her auntie was not convinced that the relationship was a good idea, as she believed the Brooks family had bad intentions. Vera's auntie was well aware of her past, and she barred Zachary from visiting their home. Despite warning from Vera's family about the Brooks' reputation, Vera felt drawn to Zach even more. Eventually, she moved in with the Brooks family, enticed by their perceived warmth towards her. However, things would soon change. Initially, Vera's life with the Brooks family seemed okay. Sherry, who suffered from diabetes and severe foot problems, convinced Vera to tend to her feet by washing, moisturizing, wrapping, and rubbing them. Eager to please her potential mother-in-law, Vera also took on household chores, cooking, and cleaning. However, it became apparent that Vera was shouldering the majority of the household responsibilities, essentially serving as an unpaid caretaker, or slave. The Brooks family not only benefited from Vera's labour, but also exploited her financially, and Sherry would take a large proportion of her disability allowance for herself, just as she did for many other Brooks family members living under her roof. The more Vera was caught in the webs of Sherry, the more Vera's family became deeply concerned. Soon enough, Vera became so distant from her mother, sister, and auntie that she would actively avoid them and run the other way at the sight of them. Vera was now completely exposed, and Sherry knew just how to take advantage of her vulnerabilities. And she soon began to pressure Zachary and Vera to have a child when they were 15 and 21 years old. Sherry was ecstatic when Vera became pregnant, especially with the prospect of having a little girl. From the very moment that Vera's bump began to show, Sherry's enthusiasm bordered on obsession. She took control of Vera's meals and drinks, ensuring they adhered to her standards, and even accompanied Vera to all of her doctor's appointments. She even called Vera's bump "my baby." Sherry took charge of various aspects of preparing for the baby's arrival, including selecting clothing and furniture, and even choosing the name. She wanted to name the baby Willadine, a sickening combination of Vera's abusive biological father's name, Willard, and Sherry's abusive father's name, Chuck Dean Emmon. Sherry's influence over the pregnancy was not only overwhelming but also deeply disturbing. Her sociopathic nature led her to concoct a plan to expedite the arrival of Willadine. Sherry allegedly schemed to spike Vera's fresh orange juice with castor oil, intending for Willadine to be born on Sherry's own birthday a month premature. This calculated and nefarious plan showed a complete disregard for the well-being of Vera or Willadine. Lo and behold, on the 4th of November 2007, Willadine was born a month premature, and as a result, Willadine was born with lung and heart problems. Sherry's insistence on being referred to as Willadine's mama is both chilling and, in the eyes of the state, legally binding. Sherry went to great lengths to manipulate Zachary to hand over all of his parental rights to her. However, it remains unclear whether Vera retained her parental rights. As time passed, Sherry's possessive behaviour towards Willadine became increasingly apparent. Despite being wheelchair-bound, Sherry monopolised most of Willadine's time, allowing Vera only limited interaction with her own child, and typically only when the baby was crying or needed changing. As more time passed, Vera's standing within the family deteriorated drastically, with few allies to support her. By this point she was treated as a second-class citizen, even by her once beloved Zachary, who showed blatant disregard for their relationship, and he actively pursued other women. The household soon descended into chaos, with thugs and criminals constantly coming and going. These criminals were associates of Little Chuck, Garth, Zach, and Punky. Illegal substances were openly dealt by these individuals under the leadership of Sherry, operating under her name Sugar Babe, and acted as a kingpin in this underworld. As Zachary pursued other women, his frustration with Vera's presence grew, leading to verbal abuse. When it became apparent that Zach had no intentions of impregnating Vera again, Sherry's attitude towards Vera soured, and she began treating her with disdain. Sherry's mistreatment of Vera escalated to physical violence, particularly when Vera assisted with tending to her leg dressings. On numerous occasions, Sherry would strike Vera with her scratching stick during these sessions. Furthermore, if Vera failed to meet Sherry's standards while helping her with her tasks, Sherry would call out for Zach, who would come to his mother's defense by subjecting Vera to further beatings. As Zach's animosity towards Vera intensified, she increasingly sought solace and support from Sherry's oldest son, Scotty. Scotty was a very flawed human, but he was reasonably mild-tempered when it came to Vera, and they both started a sort of relationship. The year 2010 brought tragedy to the Brooks family. While Punky and his girlfriend Heather were walking alongside a road, Punky stepped into the road too far and was involved in a fatal accident. Sherry was so distraught that she lost her golden boy, and she became convinced that Heather, Punky's partner, played a role in Punky's death. Sherry redirected her minions from Vera and towards Heather. She orchestrated an attack on Heather at Punky's memorial, a crazy testament to how Sherry could persuade her delinquent children of truly heinous actions. Punky was cremated, and his ashes were prominently displayed in Sherry's home, surrounded by a shrine of things that Punky loved the most, which included items of food. This shrine was off-limits to all. Sherry's control over Vera tightened even further, as she not only restricted Vera's access to Willadine, but also began to limit Vera's food intake. One day, Vera was starving. She felt compelled to take a food treat. She took a chocolate bar from Punky's shrine. Upon discovering this, Sherry erupted into a fit of rage and ordered her sons Zach, Garth, and Little Chuck to brutally beat Vera, leaving her bruised and battered with a broken nose. Despite the awareness of the neighbours regarding the ongoing attacks, neither the police nor protective services could intervene on Vera's behalf. She was legally considered an adult. If Vera didn't speak out about the attacks herself, there was nothing the police could do. This reluctance to involve the authorities stemmed from the sickening manipulation inflicted upon her by Sherry. Trapped in a cycle of abuse and manipulation, Vera remained unable to break free from Sherry's control, endangering both herself and Willadine. In addition to the already crowded household, Sherry kept a variety of poorly maintained pets including dogs, rabbits, and even a pig. This pig was confined to a cupboard within the house, and following the incident involving the chocolate bar, Sherry forced her to sleep inside and reside in the closet where the pig defecated and urinated. Zach, Sherry, and Chuck subjected Vera to a series of degrading and horrific acts, including forcing her to eat trash from the garbage, drink Zach's urine, and consume dog feces. In one particularly disturbing incident, Zach used a pipe that he found outside to essay Verna as a sick form of punishment. All the while, Sherry cheered on, alongside Garth and her youngest son Chuck, who was still a preteen at the time. Despite the obvious question of why Vera didn't simply leave, Sherry had instilled so much fear in her that she believed attempting to escape would result in the harm of Willadine. Leaving wasn't even an option that Vera could consider. Over time, this horrific life became Vera's new normal, with her spirit and self-worth shattered to such a degree that she convinced herself that she deserved this punishment. Now, Sherry's previous partner, Daniel Bixler, had a son, also named Daniel Bixler. He was known as Daniel Jr. He was notorious for being a rather violent individual. Daniel had a close relationship with Punky, and the two shared a strong bond, both claiming affiliation with the Crips gang. Upon his release from prison, wearing a teardrop tattoo on his face with pride, Daniel and his 17-year-old girlfriend Nicole were involved in a violent incident at a park where Daniel viciously attacked a young child who wouldn't vacate the swing for Nicole. Fleeing the scene, Daniel sought refuge at his Aunt Sherry's home, as the police had a warrant out for his arrest. But before his arrival, Sherry fabricated a lie to Daniel, alleging that Vera was responsible for Punky's death. This falsehood contradicted her earlier accusation that Heather was to blame, but Daniel Jr. remained unaware of this. This deceitful narrative placed Vera at even greater risk, but Sherry convinced Daniel to have restraint over his actions towards her, and that Vera's time would come. Now, of course, Vera had done nothing wrong here. The attacks on Vera escalated, and escalated quickly. There were reports from the more passive members of the family, who would state that Zach, Garth, Little Chuck, Daniel Jr. and Nicole would get high on a concoction of illegal substances and alcohol, and would then torture Vera. Nicole stuck a toothbrush inside Nicole's anus, and then made her brush her teeth with it in the presence of the rest of the family. Some of them would then become aroused and head into separate rooms to have intercourse. Sherry would then add more fuel to the fire, stating that Vera had tried to harm Willardine multiple times, and that all of the things that had gone wrong in the family were her fault. Daniel fantasized about killing Vera, even saying to her face that he could kill her and stick her on train tracks, and no evidence would remain beside a pile of hamburger meat. Daniel habitually beat her with a padlock inside of a sock, threatening her with knives if she were to ever call 911. Daniel and Nicole also liked to play a game called mud stomping. This would be where they would stomp on Vera all over her body, breaking her bones. All Vera could do was curl up in a ball and beg them to stop. This cycle continued, with Daniel one day stabbing Vera in the leg with a knife, and this was then followed by Sherry putting her index finger inside the wound. In a desperate panic, Vera sought the solace of her less brutal abuser Scotty. Scotty took advantage of the scared Vera, and the two had intercourse. By this point, there were complaints from neighbours about the state of Vera, and the police were contacted on numerous occasions about fighting in the Brooks household. There was no direct claim of Vera being under threat, but the police contacted protective services due to a concern for Willardine. However, the CPS could only send someone out to the house to retrieve Willardine and Vera the following Monday. In this very small window, Sherry had the opportunity to hatch her ultimate plan. If she could have Vera removed from the scenario, she would be the sole legal parent of Willardine. In her most sadistic moves yet, she managed to convince Zach that Vera was responsible for Punky's death. So, with Daniel, Nicole and Zach now on board with causing Vera irreversible harm, all she had to do was convince the others that killing her was the right thing to do. Mike Jr. had a girlfriend by the name of Shannon, who was pregnant. On one occasion, Sherry had covertly sprayed pepper spray in the home and blamed it on Vera. There was an accusation that because of the pepper spray, Vera had caused Shannon to suffer a miscarriage, and this was the motive for the murder. According to Scotty, he overheard Garth, Daniel and Nicole discussing plans to take someone to the skate park. However, Zach intervened, suggesting they adhere to the original plan. Vera, sensing something ominous, was instructed to put on her shoes, which prompted her to cry and plead with her attackers, questioning why. Desperate for protection, Vera pleaded with Scotty to accompany them, but Zach, wielding a knife, threatened him against doing so. Scotty watched helplessly as Nicole and Daniel also dissuaded Zach from joining them before they left the house armed with a kitchen knife. On the 26th of March 2011, a little over 13 years ago as the time of recording, Nicole and Daniel were seen on CCTV leading Vera past a row of shops and down an alley towards a railway track, only to be seen 30 minutes later without Vera. Daniel and Nicole had lured Vera to a nearby railway line, only to brutally attack her. Upon medical examination, Vera was barely recognizable, apart from her tattoo on her shoulder of a teddy bear with the name Willadine. Vera was stabbed multiple times in her legs, pelvis, face, and chest. She had multiple new and old fractures and broken bones. Vera is believed to have been alive throughout the whole ordeal. The knife she was attacked with was rather blunt, and although the knife cut her and fractured her bone, it never penetrated deep enough to sever large enough blood vessels, giving her a swift death. An attempt was made to cut her throat, with evidence of a sawing motion, and due to the knife being so blunt, Vera's clothing was removed before the attack. It was a gradual loss of blood that eventually killed Vera, as she lay alone nearby on the train track. As Nicole and Daniel fled the scene to go and get drunk and brag about their killing and Nicole's earning of a teardrop tattoo, Vera in her last moments managed to curl herself up into a ball in the center of the train tracks, avoiding the train which would eventually come. Nicole and Daniel were eventually apprehended and charged with murder.
For well over a year. The defendant's record reveals that he is a substantial risk of reoffending. There's an old adage, past is prologue, and I believe that to be true in this particular case. It's important the defendant be adequately punished because I believe that if he were not, it is likely he'll reoffend and reoffend in a violent fashion. Therefore, as to count one, the charge of murder, the court's going to impose a sentence of life with eligibility for parole only after the expiration of 30 years. As to count.
Daniel Bixler, Shannon Brooks, Zachary Brooks, Garth Brooks, Sherry Brooks, and I agreed to kill Vera Jo Reigle on March 26, 2011. We agreed to do this because Shannon Brooks said Vera Jo Reigle caused her to miscarry. Zachary Brooks got a knife and gave it to Daniel Bixler. Daniel Bixler and I made Vera leave with us. We walked Vera to the railroad tracks where Daniel stabbed her several times. Afterward, Daniel and I agreed to throw the knife in the river. All of this happened in Findlay, Hancock County, Ohio.
I just want to say that I've been very depressed the last 7 months since Vera Jo's been gone. I'm very sorry for what my cousin did. It's been stressful to me. I miss her. That's it.
Very well. Officer Broska, any information or updates that I should have from the probation department?
Your Honor, the defendant has reported his ordered well on bond, and there are no updates or issues at this time.
Thank you.
I don't want people talking bad about me because it wasn't my fault. I miss Vera. I miss Vera very deeply. Vera was my family. I'm sorry for what my cousin Danny did to her. I live with the grief every day and cry for Vera. Nobody sees my tears for her. Everybody thinks bad of me and thinks that I didn't care for her.
Daniel was found guilty. His parole eligibility is in 2052. Nicole too was found guilty, and she will be eligible for parole in 2033, a shockingly lenient sentence for the severity of the crime, considering there was evidence suggesting that many of the stab wounds were inflicted by someone of limited physical strength, such as Nicole. Other family members faced charges ranging from perverting the course of justice, resulting in sentences ranging from house arrest to 4 years imprisonment. This outcome was met with widespread condemnation, as it seemed to overlook the evidence pointing to a conspiracy to commit murder, with Sherry orchestrating the crime akin to a female Charles Manson. Despite evidence and admissions implicating Sherry as the ringleader by Daniel, she remained uncharged with the murder of Vera Jo Reigle, leading many to view the legal proceedings as a grave miscarriage of justice. In her final moments, Vera sadly knew that she was close to the end. She had the foresight to write her daughter Willadine a message that she carried on her at all times, and this message was found in her clothing pocket on the day of her death. The note is said to be given to her daughter when she is of an appropriate age. It reads, "I love you, Willadine. You are a good little baby girl. I am glad to be your mummy. And I'm glad that I had you on the 4th of November at 4:16 a.m. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, 19 inches long. Mummy loves you."